Number 10. Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader murdered 10 people in Sedgwick County, Wichita, Kansas between 1974 and 1991. Obsessed with notoriety, Rader sent taunting letters to police under the name BTK, which stood for Bind, Torture, Kill. Rader stalked his victims before breaking into their homes, then binded their limbs before strangling them. Having disappeared in 1988, BTK reemerged 2005 when he sent a floppy disk to the press which was to be his downfall. Tracing him via the floppy disk, Rader was arrested and charged, upon which he immediately confessed. He is serving 10 consecutive life sentences with an earliest possible release date of February 26, 2180. Number 9. Richard Chase. Richard Trenton Chase was an American serial killer who killed 6 people in a span of a month in Sacramento, California. He was nicknamed the Vampire of Sacramento because he drank his victims' blood and cannibalized their remains. He did this as part of a delusion that he needed to prevent Nazis from turning his blood into powder via poison they had planted beneath his soap dish. In 1975, Chase was involuntarily committed to a mental institution after being taken to a hospital for blood poisoning, which he contracted after injecting rabbit's blood into his veins. Sentenced to death on May 8, 1979, Chase committed suicide with an overdose of prison doctor-prescribed antidepressants that he had been saving up for the last few weeks on December 26, 1980. Number 8. Gary Ridgway. One of the United States' most prolific serial killers, Gary Ridgway was arrested in 2001 for 4 murders, though confessed to killing at least 70 women in Washington state throughout the 1980s and 1990s. He would pick them up, take them somewhere secluded, have sex with them, often from behind in order to get the drop on them, and then kill them by strangling them. He was brought in for questioning as a person of interest when the first bodies were found and took a polygraph test twice, once in 1982 and once in 1986, passing both times, and was a suspect during the entire investigation. He was arrested in 2001 and avoided the death penalty by providing detailed confessions and led police to the dumping sites of his victims, 5 of whom he dumped in the Green River, leading to the press nicknaming him the Green River Killer. He was convicted of 49 murders and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Number 7. David Berkowitz. Known as the son of Sam or the .44 caliber killer, David Berkowitz carried out a series of shootings in the summer of 1976. Using a .44 caliber bulldog revolver, he shot 6 people dead and wounded 7 others. Berkowitz sent a series of taunting letters to police and the press promising further shootings, terrorizing the people of New York City. During questioning, Berkowitz explained that he had been commanded to kill by his neighbor Sam Carr, who sent messages to him through Carr's dog. "He told me to kill. Sam is the devil," Berkowitz said. Eventually captured in August 1977, Berkowitz confessed to all of the killings and was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison for each murder, to be served consecutively, and is unlikely ever to be released. Number 6. Richard Cottingham. Richard Francis Cottingham is an American serial killer from New Jersey operating in New York between 1967 and 1980. He was nicknamed the Torso Killer due to his habit of dismembering his victims, usually cutting off the breasts and genitals of his victims and leaving nothing but a torso behind. He would pick up prostitutes and take them back to his hotel room, where he would handcuff them and torture them. He has claimed to have killed between 80 and 100 girls. He was found guilty of the murders, drawing a sentence of 173 to 197 years in prison.
I wanted to be the best at whatever I did. And I wanted to be the best serial killer, yes. Serial killer, yes.
Number 5. Jeffrey Dahmer. Known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, Jeffrey Dahmer was an American serial killer and sex offender who raped, murdered and dismembered 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. He would attend gay nightclubs and take men home with him and drug them so he could have his way with them. He also committed necrophilia and ate parts of his later victims, dismembering and cooking parts of their bodies within his home, and even drilled a hole in one victim's head in an attempt to create a living sex zombie. Dahmer was eventually caught after a would-be victim managed to overpower him and alert police. In 1992, Dahmer was convicted of 15 of the murders and sentenced to 15 terms of life imprisonment. However, just 2 years into his sentence, he was beaten to death by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver, at the Columbia Correctional Institution. Number 4. Dennis Nilsen. The British equivalent of Jeffrey Dahmer, Dennis Nilsen was a homosexual killer who murdered 15 gay men and boys within his home in London, England between 1978 and 1983. He would offer them alcohol and a place to stay before strangling or drowning them. He retained his victims' bodies for weeks and had sex with them before dissecting their remains and disposing of their bodies by burning or flushing the remains down the toilet, which led to his capture when human bones and flesh was discovered in his sewage system. Nielsen was convicted in 1983 of 6 counts of murder and 2 of attempted murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment. He remains imprisoned at Full Sutton Maximum Security Prison in Yorkshire, England, without the chance of release. Number 3. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy, also known as the Killer Clown, was an American serial killer and rapist who sexually assaulted and murdered at least 33 teenage boys and young men between 1972 and 1978 in Chicago, Illinois. Evidence showed that Gacy led a double life, engaging in charitable and political activities at the same time he was committing a series of sadistic torture murders. He enticed many young men to his home, promising them jobs or for homosexual activities. Then he would handcuff his partners, then strangle or choke them to death. Gacy was a successful contractor, was active in the community, and often dressed up as a clown for parties. A search warrant was executed after 2 of his teenage employees went missing and 3 lime-covered bodies were found in the crawl space. For the next 4 months, more and more human remains emerged from the house, as reporters, TV news crews, and astonished onlookers watched. A total of 29 bodies were recovered on the property and 4 more were discovered in a nearby river. Just after midnight on May 10, 1994, Gacy was executed by lethal injection. For his last words, Gacy snarled, "Kiss my ass." Number 2. Dr. Harold Shipman. Dr. Harold Frederick Shipman was an English doctor and is one of the world's most prolific serial killers in recorded history, proven to have been responsible for 250 murders. A trusted doctor, he was well respected in his community. However, colleagues and local undertakers began raising concerns over the high death rate in the area and the large number of cremation forms for elderly women that he had countersigned. Several bodies were later exhumed and post-mortems revealed diamorphine within their system. It was later established Shipman had purposely injected fatal doses of the drug in a huge number of patients, causing their death. He then forged their wills so he could inherit large sums of money and completed cremation requests to destroy the victims' bodies. The trial judge sentenced him to 15 consecutive life sentences and recommended that he never be released. Shipman later hanged himself in January 2004 in his cell at Wakefield Prison. Number 1. Dean Corll and his accomplices. Dean Arnold Corll, aka Candyman, was an American serial killer who abducted, raped, tortured, and murdered a minimum of 28 boys in a series of killings spanning from 1970 to 1973 in Houston, Texas. He had 2 teenage accomplices, David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Hanley, who would lure the boys to Corll's home where he would tie them to the torture board and rape his victims. One night Corll took it too far with Hanley and he took Corll's gun and shot him dead. The violence had erupted after Hanley brought a girl to one of Corll's bane-sniffing orgies, driving the homosexual killer into a rage. Coral had threatened Elmer with a gun, then taunted his young friend when Henley managed to disarm him. Frightened for his life, Henley insisted that he shot Coral only to save himself. Henley then called the police and took them to Coral's boathouse where they dug up 17 bodies, then to a nearby beach where they found another 10 bodies. In 1974, Elmer Wayne Henley was convicted of murder in the deaths of 6 boys and was sentenced to 6 consecutive 99-year terms. In 1975, David Brooks was convicted of murder in the death of one 15-year-old boy and was sentenced to life.